The brand new companies, their only answer is digital. Every single thing is designed digital out. The growth companies largely the same way. I think it's the big corporates that are wrestling with that and trying to figure out, how do I take this world that I've built over decades and now translate it into digital.
Welcome to This is Digital, a podcast brought to you by West Monroe. Join us as we talk to leading experts about bringing the digital mindset to your organization.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to This is Digital, a podcast about leading with digital to win in the marketplace. I'm your host, Rissa Redden, partner and chief marketing officer here at West Monroe. West Monroe is a digital services firm. We are thinkers and makers who bring hands-on experience and technical know-how to get things done and to deliver lasting value. On This is Digital, we talk to experts about how to go about not just doing digital, but being digital. We'll be sharing stories of digital successes and digital failures. This podcast is for business leaders like you who don't want to miss out on the opportunities digital holds. Today, I am delighted to introduce Betsy Zeigler. I am a Betsy Zeigler fangirl. I will state that right out front. Betsy is a beloved, impactful leader. She serves as CEO of 1871, a nonprofit innovation hub based in Chicago, but really global, not just Chicago. Betsy facilitates innovation for early stage, growth stage, and corporate innovators. 1871 brings together founders, leaders, investors, and mentors into a single unified community. Betsy has an extensive background ranging from consulting to financial services, academia, and her current role at 1871. I'm excited for you to hear more from her about the truly unique and successful work she's doing and how member organizations of 1871 are embracing being digital. So let's get to it. Please join me in welcoming Betsy Zeigler. Betsy, thank you so much for joining our podcast today.
Of course, I'm excited about it. And I'm excited that we're twinning, that our outfits are twinning.
I love, that's really just adds to the fangirl experience from my perspective. Betsy, in your own words, could you give us a little bit more about 1871?
Sure. So you did a nice job in the introduction. 1871 is a 10-year-old nonprofit innovation hub. We serve the people that you talked about, those folks that have an idea and trying to figure out if that idea can become a business, the folks that have already reached product market fit and are scaling, and then those are in corporate land and are figuring out how, what levers to pull with their own innovation strategy. And really my job and my team's job every day is to increase the probability of success of all those that we work with and shorten the time frame for them to reach that success.
Fantastic. And what types of services and experiences do you like to provide or facilitate?
So I think when you think about, and this is right up your alley with your marketing background, but we have 4 primary personas. We know what the job to be done is for each of those personas. We know what their pain points are trying to achieve those jobs. And so we've created value propositions and product suites around those pain points. And so if you're an early stage founder, it's about community because it's hard to build a company from scratch. It's about a curricular experience that brings you through a product development process. It's about mentorship. When you're a growth company, you figured out a lot of those things. So it's about how do you make sure your team continues to up level across a number of different functional areas. It's about how do you build community in Chicago connecting to other growth companies. And when you're a corporate, it tends to be either around talent or unlocking things that are stuck inside of what we call the core or the headquarters, or an awareness and a connection to what's happening in the outside world outside of the walls of that corporate. Who should they know around the globe that are working on things that are important to the problems that they're focused on?
And 1871, is it fair to say that 1871 has a focus on truly enabling innovation?
Absolutely. I think that is core to what we do every day, regardless of who we're working with. What we're trying to do is enable and unlock and accelerate innovation.
And do you have the sense that innovation is overused as a word and it means different things to different people? Or you've been in the innovation game for a long time. What's your experience been?
From my perspective, yeah, it's probably overused a little bit, but the way I think about it is that there's this maturity curve. So I talked about the maturity curve of 1871, idea to Fortune 50 that we serve, but then there's also a maturity curve inside the word of innovation. And so we see organizations that are right at that beginning, that are kind of at the theater level of innovation, right? Like entrepreneurial petting zoos. I show up at 1871, I get credit for it, right? Not really innovation. And then others that on that maturity curve up at the most sophisticated, that have really figured out how to drive change inside of their organization, pulling the levers often referred to as the soft levers, but they are, of course, the hardest things to do around incentives and performance management and communication and storytelling and things like that. And so, you could say it's overused, but I think if you double click in, different companies are figuring out how to capture the value of it and hopefully are eager to get to the next stage of their own development.
So, how are organizations embracing digital? What are you seeing?
It's a great question, and it's a wide spectrum. The brand new companies, their only answer is digital. Every single thing is designed digital out. The growth companies largely the same way. I think it's the big corporates that are wrestling with that and trying to figure out, how do I take this world that I've built over decades and now translate it into digital? And they're the ones that, in fact, I had 2 calls yesterday with leaders of Fortune 100 corporates. And I asked, well, tell me, what are your priorities for 2023? Because I'm trying to understand, where might we be able to help them, right? If we can help them, where might that be? And on both of them, within their top 5, they talked about figuring out how to unlock the data and digital strategy and execution. And these are, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 people, employers who, didn't start out that way. And that's why we need the work that you are all doing.
And when you think about the digital native versus the large corporate, I appreciate that you made the comment that digital natives are born that way, if you will, and large corporates are trying to be more digital. But how do you think about, the sort of intersection of digital and innovation? That do you need digital to be innovative, or do you need to be innovative to become more digital?
Good. It's sort of a chicken and egg question a little bit for me. I think when I think about, you have to have a sense of, if you think about innovation as being another way to talk about driving change, you have to be able to embrace that in order to be digital. I don't think you need digital to drive innovation. For me, they're sort of inseparable. I think the words that I think are often inseparable are failure and innovation, I think, are inseparable words. And I think we could kind of dig into our digital and innovation inseparable words. And I'm not sure I feel as strongly about that as I do about failure and innovation being inseparable.
It sounds like your worldview is similar to ours at West Monroe, that digital isn't just technology. It's about people, it's about vision, it's about strategy, it's about so much more than simply the technology. And in some respects, one might argue that the technology is the easiest part. It's the people and the processes, and it's the other aspects of being digital that are really more difficult.
100%.
And with your member organizations, what do you feel your startups are looking to learn from corporates, and what are your corporates looking to learn from startups?
I think that the startups, what they really want, they probably wouldn't say it as plainly as I will, but what they want are contracts, and they want cash, and they want contracts. Truly, right? Yes, great. Mentorship, advisory, support, and helping think about how do you navigate a big company environment, of course, but in service of having a corporate be a customer. I think on the flip side, I think some corporates look to young companies as ways to accelerate problem solving of key problem statements that they have identified. We can come back to that point in a minute, because I don't think many corporates do that part particularly well, meaning I don't think they define their problems particularly well. But so they accelerate in, they want I think in some cases to be able to say we're mentoring young companies, which has sort of a halo effect of storytelling inside the organization. So therefore we are innovative, or therefore we are cool. They might be looking at them for ways to acquire talent in a kind of a different channel than they have traditionally. I think they say things like, we want to work with startups to learn how to increase our nimbleness, increase our speed, all of that. I think that's probably true at some level, but at the end of the day, a big corporate is focused on execution, and a young company is not yet, right? A young company is exploring an old company, which was once a startup. Let's remind ourselves, right? Every big company at one point was an idea in somebody's head, right? It was once this idea trying to figure out if it could have customers. Exploration, execution. When you're in execution mode, how you measure performance, who you hire, how you hold them accountable is 180 degrees different than what you do when you're in exploration mode. And I think the biggest opportunity for corporates is to figure out, how do you continue to do your execution mode, but also have space for exploration. And very few companies, I think, have figured that out.
Are there some that come to mind that you think have?
I think there's a couple. I think the Kellogg company has figured that out, at least in part of their business, where they stood up. And I don't work for Kellogg, and so if anyone's listening that works at Kellogg and I get part of the story wrong, my apologies. But from what I understand, in a portion of the business led by a leader who's now moved on to another organization, they created basically a second team. They brought in a team of leaders at the time from Silicon Valley and said, you have a different mission, you have a different budget, there's a big wall that's between you and the other team, and you go create, you go do these interesting things while this team continues to focus on the stuff that allows us to hit our quarterly numbers. And then once you're ready over here, we'll port it back in. Now, I think that is very interesting. I think it certainly has opportunity for change management issues once it's ready to port over and people are like, well, wait a second, what? What's going on? But I would call that one out. I think Navistar is doing a really nice job on that by creating space for internal teams to work on real projects that have the potential to spin out and ideas that end up being part of the core business. And full disclosure, some of those teams are building with 1871 right now. But that's changing the way they look at their portfolio of things they're working on and hiving off a portion to be truly exploratory and truly give people on the team space to make that their full-time job inside of the big company. And they're connected to the problems, they're connected to well-defined problems that the company has articulated. But it's that kind of thing that you need to do. We all know, well, those of us that have been at least working as long as I have know that many a time you've gone through an exercise working for a company where, it's like this idea suggestion box and you go through some filtering. And at the end of the day, an idea pops out the bottom and you say, that's what we're going to put all of our hopes and dreams on that idea to bring us some magical something. And then what happens? Then you put people on it, but you say it has to be out of hide. You don't actually get to work on it during normal work hours. There's no dollars for me to invest in you. You don't really get to do it. And then it fails. And then the person who did it has a performance management that says, well, you failed. And there's no storytelling about that. And so there's at the risk of going on too long here, there's a lot we can learn from. You need an idea marketplace. You need to create space and time for people to work on those projects. By the way, you should work on a minimum of 5 at a time. There's research behind that. Which
as a business,
you could dig into that. You need to consider rewarding people for productive experimentation, right? That they try things, even if they don't work. You need to invest in storytelling inside of your organization. And when I was at a previous job, we had a best failure forum where we tried to get people to talk about things they tried but failed to make it safe. right? For people to do more than that. Anyway, that's a lot. That's a long answer to your question, but happy to double click into any of that if it's helpful.
Well, I'm so curious about the forum for celebrating failure. Was it sort of like an open mic night where you stand up and share the story of your failure? I mean, what did that look like?
It was in a team. It was when I was at Northwestern, and actually the idea came from one of the people on my team. Actually, he had been he was a colleague of mine from McKinsey that I then hired to come to Northwestern when I went over to Northwestern. And he came up with it, and basically in team meetings, and there was probably, I don't know, maybe 130, 140 people on my team, when we would come together, the first part of the meeting would be a handful of people would stand up and talk about, this is the problem I was trying to solve. I tried X, parts of X worked, parts of X didn't work. This is what I learned. Here's what I'm doing now to try it again. And then, we clapped and went on to the next part, and just tried to make it part of the norm. It's not rational for people to try things that they think are going to fail. It's not rational behavior in most organizations, because there is very few, if any, performance management things that say, great, you failed. Let's give you extra points, right? So that's a level of sophistication when you're investing in innovation that you have to pay attention to. If you don't solve for the thing that supports rational behavior, you're not going to get very many people to try stuff. And so I didn't have the power to change the performance management system at Kellogg, but I could create a layer of safety inside my own team by publicly rewarding. And, of course, I would share my things. In fact, my team at 1871, my senior team at 1871, the senior team has fallen down on something. And I told that team yesterday that the four of us are going to stand in front of the team either this coming Monday or the following Monday and talk about that again, to say we all, mistakes are, they happen all the time. Let's find the opportunity in how to think about things differently going forward and make that a safer, I know I've used the word safe several times, but I think it's important. Back to my comment a few minutes ago, you cannot have innovation without failure. You cannot. If you want $1 billion outcome in a company, right? How many ideas do you need to have if you assume sort of venture returns? How many, this sort of myth of having the one magical idea, you have no idea which idea is going to win at the beginning. You have no idea. So you need 250 ideas to get $1 billion outcome if you have kind of venture level returns. Well, that's, a different way to think about pursuing paths inside of big corporates. You cannot predict ahead of time what's going to be the winner.
Another question for you, Betsy. You mentioned earlier the importance of a solid problem statement. How do you think about that, or how do you coach people to find the problem statement? I'll never forget when you and I first met, you said, what problem are you trying to solve? And I did not have a great answer. I was like, I think 1871 is cool. Like, that is not a great problem statement. But how,
I like
why
it.
is that so important to you? Well, naturally, but that's something that you ask frequently. What problem are you trying to solve? And I'm curious sort of how you got there and how you help people articulate what problem they're trying to solve.
Yeah, I ask that question 25 times a week. I've probably done it 7 times today because here's why. Thought one, I think the 2 most important skills that we should be training people on, no matter what their job is, like literally, you're in business, you're a scientist, you're a nurse, you're a veterinarian, I don't care. The 2 most important things that people learn are how to define a problem and how to influence or drive change. So when I was at Kellogg, the dean and I were talking, and she gave me something to work on, and I made the assumption that I understood what problem we were solving, and I spent like 6 weeks working on something, and when I delivered it, it was like way off. Wasn't even in the universe that she was thinking about. And it was like this wake up call, like, oh my gosh, like I've abandoned all my training. I've forgotten that why this is so important. So from that point on, I've kind of made this commitment that will never happen again to me. And I try to make sure it doesn't happen for members of my team, because when that happens, people spin. right? If they don't know what problem they're solving, they're either wasting time like I did for that particular project on stuff that doesn't matter, or they spin and they're still wasting time, but now they're afraid. Like in my case, I wasn't afraid because I thought I was doing the right thing. I wasn't, but I thought it was. The worst case scenario is that you have no idea what you're doing, but you're afraid to ask, and so you're spinning. And then, as you know, if you spin for too long, then it becomes even harder to ask for help, because now you passed the deadline. Now you can't go back and say, well, I didn't know what you were trying to ask me in the first place. Like, it's very difficult. And so what I tried to force my team to think about is, and I put them through training, and I've offered this training to the founders, and I put some of the board members to this training because they've been energized by it, of how do you really break it down and define a problem statement that has what success looks like, a time frame, and how you're going to know, like how you're going to know it happened. And if we can get down to that, then we can batter that. Then that's what unites us. Then we're shared on that, and that's going to iterate in a little bit on the edges, right? But at least it creates the start of a structure. And then it keeps everybody kind of in the same space, in the same room. It is not easy. But like I said, I mean, I don't know how many conversations I've had today already, many. And probably half of those I've been like, well, tell me what problem you're solving, because people like to talk about solutions. It's more fun to talk about solutions. It is. And so my message is, go slow to go fast. Lock it in. Then you can fly. But if you fly first, the likelihood that you're missing the mark on what you're trying to get done is pretty high. So that's my soapbox, my afternoon soapbox of problem definition. But like I said, I use it a lot.
Betsy, you're reminding me of, I love the movie The Incredibles, and your story of the dean reminds me of that great scene. And it's, have you forgotten who you are? You are Elastigirl. And that is my favorite bit of the whole movie. And I will watch the whole movie just to see that tiny little scene.
Yes, agreed.
So a couple more questions and then we will wrap up. Who owns innovation in an organization?
Well, if you ask a CEO who owns innovation and they say everybody, what does that mean to you?
Nobody.
Right. So at least I say right. I mean, that's what I believe as well. And so from my perspective, you have to have somebody that is responsible for pushing that agenda, and that person, well, the CEO better believe in it first. And then if the CEO has a deputy that's focused on it, that person's got to be a direct report to the CEO. You can't bury that person in the layers. And you'd expect, if you rip the roof off of a corporate and you're in your drone kind of flying over it, and you're on top of different functional areas or different business units, undoubtedly there is innovation happening in all of those places, for sure. The challenge and why you need the person is the translation between the units and or between the business units, right? There's likely different vocabulary. There's likely different measurement tools. There's likely different processes that people use. Doesn't mean innovation isn't happening inside of those areas. It means that there's no way to really talk about it. And so in my view, you need a person, you need a leader that has that responsibility, and you need a shared metric. And that shared metric is likely something that's financial in nature. Doesn't mean that everything has to work, but it's something we don't have to dispute the definition of the numerator and the denominator, for example. And so some people would argue that you need kind of an entrepreneur in residence. I think that's super tricky language inside a big corporate. I think chief innovation officer is the more common one. I think that, or chief digital officer or something like that. I think that some companies figure out how to do that well, where it's really a cross-functional role versus like my own unit and this group of people do innovation. Like I'm not a big fan of that as a concept, because I think innovation's happening everywhere. You're just not getting the value of it. But this is, if you look back, 100 years ago, there weren't chief marketing officers, right? That it wasn't a function that was important. This is a function that is now deeply important. So I would expect more of those roles and that to be a career path to be much more evident now and in the near future.
And Betsy, going back to 1871, what are you seeing that you're really excited about right now?
Oh, well, I have this job so I'm a person that likes the sparkly thing in the corner. I get distracted by like
shiny bits in the park.
all kinds of things to look at and play with and touch and see. And so I've got the perfect job for that because, every day I get to meet these people, no matter what kind of size organization they're in, that are trying to do really hard things. And I get really excited about the things that they're trying to solve. So I can certainly share a few examples, but there's so much positivity in my own experience that comes from being surrounded by all these people who are trying to change the world, right? You go through the last couple of years. The last couple of years have not been easy for anybody. Certainly it's hit some people harder than others, for sure. But I run a nonprofit and I'm a landlord and I do events, right? Like bad businesses to be in during the peak of COVID.
All of them, yes.
I'm also a membership organization. I'm also a kind of membership problem-solving organization. Every day I get buoyed because the people I get to surround myself with see all those constraints as opportunities. And they're not oh, woe is me. They are, okay, awesome. Like that's going to mean that I've got to shift in this direction and think about it this way. And then I can kind of come out the other end this way. And, God, like how lucky am I that every day I get to talk to people who think like that? So I'm endlessly engaged and inspired by the people that I get to. I'm very, very lucky that my calendar is chock-a-block full of very interesting people, many solving problems that I didn't know existed. And I get particularly excited about problems that I didn't know existed.
And as we wrap up, Betsy, what's next for you and for 1871?
Well, I think what we learned for 1871 is that we went virtual on March 12th, 2020. And that allowed us to, again, pandemic driven, that allowed us to start to support people all over the world. And so my vision of 1871 generation, 2, where we just started decade number 2 in May, is how can 1871 be the and to other organizations around the country and globe that convene people like we convene. We are the only nonprofit organization that I know of that, as you said at the beginning, has all those things under one physical/virtual roof and does that progression from idea to Fortune 50. We have an embarrassment of talent and access at 1871. So I believe that the most important thing to do right now is to get more and more people to start companies. 100% of the job growth over the last 3 decades has come from startups. So if the startup engine is broken, the job creation engine is broken. So my job, is to continue to do the startup and help the scale and help the unlock, but really on that startup. And so can we partner with other places around the country that are convening people trying to drive that startup? And can we be their and? That's not an economic proposition. That is a reach and relevance. That is can I lock arms? So today I was in calls with Kansas City and Peoria and a neighborhood in Chicago, all separate. I just got back from Dublin 2 weeks ago. I was in Mexico City signing an agreement with Mexico City. How do we lock arms with other nonprofits so that together we can advance the world forward? So that is where we are going as an organization. As for me, I get to be the one that gets to zip into the 1871 CEO suit every day and drive that change forward.
Well, and I love the focus on the and. There's a lot of discussion about divisiveness or polarization, and to be the and is the perfect place to be. One last question for you, Betsy. We ask all of our guests, what does being digital mean to you?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the conversation, but for me, being digital is really the mindset. It is the sense of embracing change and staying open and listening to people and leveraging data to understand kind of where the next shift is coming, and then adapting and moving quickly to deliver against it.
Well, thank you so much, Betsy. And for those interested in learning more about 1871, where would you like them to go?
They can go to our website, 1871.com. Our social handles are at 1871 Chicago. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I'm Betsy Z, like zebra, EO as a play off my last name. And I look forward to connecting. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Rissa. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Betsy. It was a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to This is Digital. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow or subscribe on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget to leave us a review. For more information on This is Digital, visit westmonroe.com/thisisdigital.